Joining me now is one of those other contenders vying to be the next DNC chair, New York Democratic State Senator James Skoufis. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. And you may not be a name that's well known to many of our viewers, so I want to start big picture. Why do you want to run the Democratic Party, and why do you think you're the best person for the job?
Thanks for having me, Gabe. Pleasure to be here. I'm running to be DNC chair because I so strongly believe, as do the vast majority of Democrats, that we have to get back to one thing and one thing only, and that is winning again as a Democratic Party. I come from a district that Donald Trump just won by 12 percentage points. I won re-election by 14 points. In fact, he's won my district 3 times. And so I am the outsider in this race. I happen to think that's a positive attribute. I wear that as a badge as I'm talking to DNC members and seeking to earn their support. The next DNC chair has to be hyper-focused on getting us back to what we used to do, having a really big tent, coalition building, bringing back the folks who are now on the outside looking in and believe the Democratic Party has been disrespectful to some viewpoints, and that's what I'm looking to do as the next DNC chair.
Senator, I don't think you'll get much argument for Democrats that they want to win again. The question is how to do it, and I want to press you on something that you said. You talked about being an outsider and bringing an outsider perspective. Isn't that the same as Mr. Wickler and Mr. Martin? I mean, Wisconsin and Minnesota, they're from those places. Aren't they a long way from the Beltway as well?
So I have a lot of respect for both of them. In fact, I've been in touch with them over the last couple of days. There are a lot of things. They've contributed a lot to the Democratic Party and to the DNC specifically. But I think objectively, anyone would be hard-pressed to call them outsiders. You know, they've been part of the DNC. They've got a list as long as my arm of years, if not decades-long DNC relationships. I come at this as someone who doesn't. I'm introducing myself to everyone outside of New York for literally the first time. I've made about 100 or so calls to DNC members, and what has been heartening is that these members, these conversations, they all get it. They are reading the room. They understand we've got to do things differently. We don't want someone who's a product of a party machine or an operative or a Beltway guy. We need someone who just knows how to win.
And Senator, I do want to turn, though, to your diagnosis of the party. Kamala Harris was the first Democratic presidential nominee to lose a popular vote in 20 years. And what's your explanation for that? Is this an issue of policy or messaging?
It's a little bit of both, but it first starts with showing up everywhere. I go to some places in the rural parts of my district, for example, and folks tell me, thank you not only for delivering, you're the only Democrat that even shows up and talks to us in our communities, and does so in a way that's not condescending, that's not lecturing, that includes listening, that speaks to them in a relatable manner. I'm not academic in the way that I'm talking to people, telling them what they should believe, the economy's doing well, when in fact they're going to the supermarket and they could see for themselves that it's not, using terms like Latinx, being overly politically correct. That's how we get back to winning, first and foremost. But within the DNC, and this is important, we have to reorient what our priorities are. We can't just reform around the margins. We've got to shift a lot of our spending, cut out the sweetheart deals with contractors and vendors, and send that money to the people in the trenches, the state parties, the county parties, and our partners in organized labor.
And Senator, our lead story today was President Biden announcing his pardon of his son, Hunter. At a moment, the Democrats are warning against judicial overreach, against the politicization of the Justice Department. Is that pardon counterproductive?
So I'm a father. I get where he's coming from, this intense desire, I'm sure, to protect his family at all costs. Let's be clear, Donald Trump is probably about to pardon people who beat up police officers on January 6th. So there's a little bit of a double standard here. I don't want to hear the noise from Donald Trump and his allies on this. But to be clear, this does undermine our case that we have to press as Democrats against Donald Trump's ridiculous claims that the DOJ is being weaponized against him and his loyalists. We as Democrats have been carrying a lot of water for President Biden this year, and it's really unfortunate that we have to spend time expectedly on this program talking about that instead of the future of the Democratic Party and the DNC.
Those are some strong words, Senator. Do you think President Biden should have dropped out earlier?
I do, and I've made that clear, and I think if you're running for DNC chair, you should be able to answer that question. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to go on Joe Rogan's podcast and Fox News regularly and answer tougher questions. Yes, he should have dropped out sooner. I believe Vice President Harris certainly still would have been the nominee even with an open primary, and it would have made her a stronger nominee in the end.
Senator, how should the 2028 Democratic primary be different than what we've seen in the past? What do you want the primary to look like?
So it's going to be, I'm sure, an open primary. It remains to be seen whether Vice President Harris runs again. If she wants to run, she should. But South Carolina was moved up in the calendar in order to make the early nominating contests a bit more diverse. And they deserve to get a crack at being first. They had an uncompetitive primary for the presidential nomination. We should let them be first, have a test run at least a single time, and then we can evaluate whether it worked or not, whether we should reevaluate the order. But it's going to be an open primary, and that will make for a stronger nominee for sure.
State Senator James Skoufis, one of the contenders for DNC chair. We really appreciate your time, Senator.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.